Welcome everybody, and thanks for coming in your lunchtime today to the Lunchtime Tech Sessions put on by Canterbury Tech. I'm Louisa Taylor, I'm the General Manager, and we also have Jennifer Hewitt here, our Events and Marketing Manager. I can see Khan, one of our committee members there as well. Hi Khan, good to see you. We are brought to you thanks to our annual sponsors. So I'd just like to say a big thanks to them, because without them we couldn't put these awesome events on. We've got the UC School of Business that's offering the most relevant MBA program and executive education program in the country. We've got AWS, known for their infrastructure, but ready to assist you with all sorts of business knowledge in lots of areas. So if you're exploring new technologies, get in touch with them. Lumen PDF, a global yet Christchurch headquartered business, giving you PDF editing and much more. Such an awesome team based here in Christchurch, but with a massive global customer base. Stratos Technology Partners, their CEO David was a long-term supporter and committee member of Canterbury Tech, and they've been very supportive of us over the years. They're doing a lot of work in helping people understand how to incorporate AI into their Microsoft stack. So that's really interesting work they're doing now. Integration Works is actually helping Canterbury Tech to integrate two of our systems at the moment, which has been a really fun piece of work, and loving working with one of their seniors there, Sean. He's been fantastic to work with. And Crescent Consulting, who are a fantastic Canterbury recruitment company helping you with technology hiring needs, also a very long-term supporter of Canterbury Tech. So some of the benefits of being a member, we've just released this new benefit, which is if you are a company member of Canterbury Tech, you can now submit a blog on the website. So just go to the news and views section, drop down, submit a blog, type in what you want, upload a nice picture to illustrate that, and that will go through to Jen to review, and we'll be releasing blogs a few times a month, so that there'll be more content there. If you want to read about what our members are talking about, there's a lovely blog section there where you can read all of the back content. Coming up on the 15th of April, on Monday, we are running our once a month a work supporting women into technology careers. This is the Power series that Christchurch NZ had started, and we are wholeheartedly supporting. We've seen so many amazing women transfer out of other careers into technology careers and land their first jobs, making beautiful connections in the community. So if you know someone in your life that's thinking about a tech career, get them to come along. Very supportive environment. So this is Monday at Epic Centre. It'll be during the Tech Week bonanza that we're running at the Epic Centre there. But this time we're talking about how do you showcase some of the projects you might want to make and show off your code using GitHub. So if you're someone that's starting to dabble in tech in your spare time and you want to translate that to employers, this is a great place to come along and find out how to do that. So Tech Week, it's coming up soon. It's the 13th to the 20th of May, and Canterbury Tech that's including both of the weekends. Canterbury Tech's putting on a Monday to Friday Tech Week Hub at the Epic Centre, and that's brought to you thanks to our supporting partners, Christchurch NZ and the Epic Centre. So we're pretty excited about that. What we're doing is themed days on each of the days, Monday to Friday, where we'll have back-to-back speakers for most of the day, and some of the evenings we'll be having evening events as well. So we thought we'd put the big problems of the world and get some awesome people doing work about those problems to show us their view of what the future could be. So the Monday of Tech Week, which is that 15th of April, we're going to have the Future of Transport Day. We've got some awesome speakers from NZTA Innovation Fund and the people that have been recipients of that fund, looking at the innovative work they're doing. We've got ECAN, a cargo bike manufacturer, manufacturing locally, and an aerospace update from Mark Rocket and Aerospace New Zealand. So that's going to be an interesting day. On the Tuesday, we have the Future of Health Day, which is sponsored by Spark Health. And we've got some awesome speakers. Ministry of Awesome is going to be hosting a panel of women founders in health. And we've also got people talking about VR and how it's being used in mental health treatment, and how you can make the transition from clinician to tech entrepreneur. So there's going to be some really interesting ones that day. On the Wednesday, brought to you by ASICS, which is the Australian Stock Exchange, we've got the future of food and climate. We're going to be hearing from the new airport developers, talking about how they're going to decarbonise the airport. We've got Flip Greater talking about her new manufacturing plant for manufacturing plant-based foods, and some interesting research into mussels and how that might be the future of food for New Zealand. Thursday, we've got the Future of Business Day. I don't know why we're still looking for a sponsor for this one. This is a brilliant day. So if you want to be a sponsor for this day, please let me know. But we've got a really interesting breakfast and morning tea. So the breakfast is sponsored by MB. We're going to get tech leaders and course providers to come together and look at where our skills gaps are and where we should be focusing our energy. What sort of people do we need to be skilled in what coming out of our educational institutes? And then a morning tea by Deloitte. They're going to show you what digital transformation looks like, and you can actually get involved in a mock digital transformation project, and they're going to put on a nice morning tea. So that's pretty exciting. On the Friday, we've got the Future of Tech Day, and the end of that day, we're going to be finishing off with a monster meetup, which is inviting all of the amazing technical meetups that we have in Christchurch to get together and have a party. And we've got an amazing comedian that night who's going to be hosting us for some lightning talks, and then you'll have a chance to walk around all the different tables and talk to different people. So if you're a developer and you're interested in finding out what other meetups there are to join, or if you're looking for your professional brethren, if you're looking for people that are, got the same feathers as you, you might find your customer success group there as well, eh? There's the project managers group, business analyst group, all sorts of different groups there. And if you're an organizer of a meetup, we're having an unconference just before that meetup, so get in touch to find out more. If you want to find out more about Canterbury Tech events, we've got a very extensive calendar on our website, and you can actually subscribe to that so that it's in your calendar at work, so you never forget what's happening on a Tuesday ever again. If you want to advertise on that, then please you can submit an event through the website as well. And now I'd like to take some time to just introduce our speaker for today. So Ngaio is a very experienced technology executive. She's worked with some of the most, the biggest household names that you will know, like Google, Visa, and Salesforce. She's been in those senior leadership, product, and customer success roles in those companies. And she's led organizations through transformations to sort their customer success journeys out and execute that operationally. She now runs her own consulting business, but has moved back to New Zealand in 2021 and now settled in Christchurch. So we're very lucky to have Ngaio and her husband Brad as new members of Canterbury Tech, and we thought we couldn't waste another day but get her to share some of her customer success expertise with us. So Ngaio, we will hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that introduction. And let me just pull up the presentation that I am going to be giving to you guys. So we're going to do a slideshow.
If you have any questions running through Ngaio's presentation, feel free to pop those in the chat and we'll run through the questions towards the end.
Okay, perfect. And I'm assuming the slideshow's up. I actually can't see it on my screen with my instance of. So are we good to go? Perfect. All right, so I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you guys about a subject that I'm extremely passionate about, which is how do you build a world-class customer success organization? And from my conversations with Louisa and other people in the tech community in New Zealand, my understanding is that customer success is a relatively new concept for the New Zealand market. And so I kind of view this as a dialogue and an opportunity to kind of introduce how I've thought about customer success across my career, and how other companies think about customer success, and kind of this building blocks of how you actually start implementing a customer success mentality within an organization and actually kind of get it kickstarted and go from there. So the first question that I want to pose to you guys is a very simple question. Is customer success a cost center or a revenue center? So if you want to do a quick show of hands or an emoji for cost center, that'd be fantastic. And then if you think it's a revenue center, how many of you think it's a revenue center? All right, perfect. All right, that's super helpful for me. So before we begin, I'm going to actually start with a quick history of customer success. I am a failed history major. I have 2 degrees in history and somehow ended up working in tech for most of my career. So any chance I get to talk about history is fantastic. So customer success is actually methodology that started about 25 years ago with a company in the late 90s called Vantiv. And Vantiv was one of the early SaaS companies, and they were having a massive problem. They were doing a fantastic job of growing their business, but effectively what was happening was at the 1-year mark, they were hemorrhaging most of their customers. And so the senior management team started doing an analysis of what was going on, and what came out was, customers were super excited. They had spent all this money, but as soon as the sale had completed, basically the customers had lost all momentum. There wasn't a lot of communication. There wasn't a lot of clear understanding of what an actual SaaS implementation looked like and how challenging and how time consuming it could be. And there wasn't anyone within Vantiv actually chaperoning the entire process and really acting in the customer's best interest. And so they basically created a department that they called customer success, didn't quite know what they were doing, but they threw some bodies at it and said, your job is to figure out how to make these customers happy. And from Vantiv, it got adopted by a company called Siebel, which is still in existence. Vantiv got acquired by Oracle in the late 90s. But it wasn't really until about 2005 that customer success as a management practice really came into the mainstream. And it was actually Salesforce that was the big proponent of customer success. And Salesforce, Mark Benioff is the consummate sales guy who does a fantastic job of getting people really excited about products and things that are really not that sexy at the end of the day. And what was happening was they were doing a fantastic job of acquiring customers left and right. The reality was they were also hemorrhaging more customers than they're acquiring. And so they're looking at the numbers and they're running out of customers, and the customers that they have are really upset with them. And it's really hard once you've alienated an existing customer to really turn that situation around. And so they coined a phrase internally at Salesforce that kind of became the rallying cry of the company, which is customers for life. And it was this methodology that as soon as you became a customer at Salesforce, we were going to do everything within our power to make you happy. It did not matter what it was. We were going to make you happy. We were going to make you love our product. We were going to make you renew. And so all of that methodology kind of ended up in the customer success function. And so it owns everything from onboarding, implementation, rollout, support, renewals, and upsells. So the short and simple explanation of what customer success is, it's a way to get your customers to be really passionate about a product. And the fundamental issue that a lot of SaaS companies have is that SaaS is complicated. SaaS companies exist because you're trying to solve a fundamental challenge and obstacle that your customers have. And the people working at these companies are extremely passionate, but your clients really aren't. At the end of the day, they're paying you money to make those problems go away. And so with the customer success team, your responsibility is how do you make it as easy as possible for your customers to use your product, to understand who to go to, how to get problems solved, where to get new information from for all the new features, functionalities, et cetera, that are coming on board, and ultimately have somebody formally own that renewal process and getting the people to continue to spend money with you. So any questions so far? All right. So there are three basic customer engagement models that you kind of see across the customer success ecosystem. And I've worked for two of these companies, and my husband was an exec at Cisco. So I feel somewhat well equipped to talking about all of them. So the first one is the reactive customer support model. And so typically this is a model that you see at two flavors of companies in my experience. First are relatively early stage companies that haven't necessarily hit the inflection point for customer acquisition. And part of that is, if you have limited resources, limited headcount, your primary focus is going to be on building the product, building out the tech stack, sales. It's not so much on, what you actually do with the customers, because you don't really have that many customers yet. The other characteristic that I see this at is actually really large companies like Google. So a lot of the people that are the industry leaders in their industry. And part of the reason why Google does this is it's a high volume business. They do have a lot of products where the average customer spend is actually quite low, and the long-term value of the customer really isn't that high. And so from a service model, it just doesn't really make sense to do a super proactive outreach. And so when I was at Google, I was actually a product manager on a product called AdWords Express. And when I was there, it was the fourth iteration of this product. It was an advertising product that was geared for SMB, mom and pop businesses. So if you think like a car repair place, a hairdresser, places where you're not buying anything online. Most of them didn't have businesses. Most of them had AOL accounts. And this was well after AOL was cool and popular, still have. And we built a phenomenal product. And the product could automate your AdWords keywords. We set up your bidding strategy. We even wrote your ads for them. We had AI that would do A/B testing in the background, come up with the best advertising copy ever. So on the tech stack side, we were fantastic. The reality was on the customer side, it was a complete disaster. We didn't send welcome emails to our customers. You can actually find your account. It would actually take about 5-10 minutes of janking around on the website to actually find it. We didn't send monthly statements. We didn't tell our customers when they had run out of money. We didn't have auto pay on. And a lot of our customers actually thought we were spammers. And so we had this product, we were growing over 100% year-over-year revenue, but we were also hemorrhaging something like 70% of our customers by month 6 of the product. But conversely too, our management team didn't care because the product was growing so fast and so quickly. And there wasn't necessarily an incentive for us to fix a lot of those underlying issues. And so, we had a help desk FAQ, but we didn't actually really provide customer support. And you'll see this across a lot of the Google products, or products where there just isn't enough money being generated on an individual customer to really do more of that customer success. So it's more of a customer support-ish model. The other two models that you see in the customer success arena are the sales-led and the customer success-led. So sales-led, one of the market leaders in this is actually Cisco. And so Cisco has an approach where the customer relationship is actually run by the sales team. And so you have really experienced salespeople that are responsible for maintaining the revenue after they've sold the deal. And so the sales team are responsible for bringing in the engineers, bringing in all of the people from around the company to really service the account and really drive the upsell and cross-sell of like services or large tech stacks. The downside with this model, though, is it really only works if you're a really high ticket product. You need to be generating 6-7 figures minimum per customer for this to actually be cost effective, because salespeople are expensive. You have commissions that you have to pay out, and there's a huge opportunity cost associated with it. If salespeople are running the customer success aspect of it, they're not going out and hunting for new customers. They're having to basically farm the existing customers. So the success model works for certain characteristics businesses. It doesn't necessarily work for most businesses unless you have that high of a price point and a lot more of those additional services being built into what that offering is. And then the final one is actually Salesforce. So Salesforce is kind of the market leader in creating this customer success discipline, but also really evangelizing it. And with the customer success model, it's worked really well because they build out, a comprehensive team. You've got the customer success managers, you've got the implementation services team, you've got an entire implementation ecosystem. You also have a really robust support offering. And then we also have had a really robust education. So for customers that didn't have the financial resources or didn't necessarily have dedicated Salesforce admins, we had all the certification courses. We had a lot of materials that made it really easy for customers to figure out how to use the product and really upskill themselves and really set the companies up for success. The downside with it is it does get really headcount intensive. It can get really expensive. And because it wasn't really driven by sales, revenue does become a bit of a secondary consideration. So you really have to train the organization to focus on a lot of the key revenue drivers and profitability and things like that to really ensure that you are getting the best financial outcomes from the customer success division. All right. So one of the things that, recognizing in New Zealand, a lot of us are working at relatively small tech companies that are still, early stage or in relatively niche markets. I want to be cognizant of what's actually realistic for a lot of companies to do. And I've built customer success organizations from scratch. And so, in the simplest form, there are three key functions that customer success will take care of. So one would be the day-to-day management of the customers. The second will be the implementation support. So making sure that, if they buy a technology stack, that it is in fact getting implemented, there is a time frame, et cetera. And then also support desk. So when questions come in, et cetera. The hardest thing for most companies is actually going from no one doing customer success to that first person, because the first person that joins a customer success org, this is everything that they're going to be doing. They're going to be doing a bit of everything. It's, it's more of a reality of what it is. And you have to be very cognizant and very mindful of creating a realistic expectation for what that person or people end up doing. So one of my first jobs was when I worked for a company called Corporate Executive Board. And we were a large consulting business. We worked with most of the Fortune 500 companies, and we were publicly traded, and we were missing revenue one year. We needed a couple $1 million in additional revenue. And so we launched a consulting practice for heads of investor relations. And I was tasked with being the head of customer success for this consulting practice. And so when I joined, I had no customers. It was great. I didn't have a boss because everyone was really busy on closing revenue for Q4. And so I went from 0 to 90 Fortune 500 companies in about a month. And it was great because I could set this really fantastic customer experience. And so I did onboarding calls with all of them. I was flying up once a month to meet with most of them in person. I was talking to most of their teams weekly. It was great. And I had the highest CSAT scores in the company. Very, very happy customers. The problem was I went from 90 customers to over 300 customers. And I created a super unrealistic expectation for my customers. And from a finance standpoint, the CFO looked at my business and told me I didn't warrant any additional headcount because I wasn't hemorrhaging customers. Our renewal rate was extremely high. We had the highest renewal rate in the company. But conversely too, I was having to juggle things. And so you need to be really mindful when you're going from that 0 to 1 person of really setting more of what a reasonable expectation is. Ultimately, I got out of that situation. I went to business school. I don't recommend it just from a cost standpoint, but it definitely reinforced for me that you have to be very, very cognizant of what you're getting yourself into. So one of the first things that's really essential for customer success is actually segmenting your customers. And it's something to start doing a lot earlier in the process than I think a lot of businesses really start thinking about. So in my experience, all of your customers are ultimately going to fall into one of three buckets. You're going to have your SMB businesses. These are the people that are always going to be spending a little amount of money with you. It's going to be relatively stable, but they're never going to be spending at the level of some of your other customers. You've got your mid-market businesses. They're going to have more license needs or more needs on the business. And then you're going to have your enterprise businesses. These are the ones that are effectively going to be your cash cows and really drive a lot of the profitability of customer success. The faster that you start segmenting your customers into these, the easier it is for you to set different service level expectations. Because one of the, going back to the prior slide, one of the biggest problems that I see a lot of businesses doing is trying to treat all their customers the same. And a lot of companies, you'll have a bunch of free customers. You'll have people that aren't really spending that much money with you. And so people will end up taking as much time as you give them. And so you really have to start thinking about your customer success or your time as a very finite resource and really figure out where are you going to get the most value from your time allocation versus everything else that you could be doing. So speaking of business school, one of the most important things I learned at business school is something called the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule basically means that for basically any problem in business, 20% of something is going to be responsible for 80% of the work associated with it. So in respects to customer success, the 80-20 rule is really simple. 80% of your revenue is only going to come from 20% of your customers. If you do any analysis on your customer base, it's disgusting how accurate this is, because I've gone through exercises where I've spent weeks doing the analysis and it invariably comes back to this 80-20. The other aspect of it is 80% of your time and your team's time and resources will be consumed by 20% of your customers. There are always going to be the people that are going to be constantly contacting you, needing help, wanting feedback, needing to bounce ideas off of you, whatever it is. At the end of the day, for your customer success team to really be successful, you need as much overlap between these two groups as possible. Oftentimes when you do the analysis, these are actually two completely distinct cohorts, where your highest spending customers are actually consuming none of your resources, and your lowest spending customers are actually consuming all of your resources. And so you really need to start thinking about that relatively early on in the customer success journey of how do you ensure that there's as much overlap as possible, and that you train your customers in large respect as to what the acceptable engagement or utilization of customer success resources are for you and the team. Okay. So another aspect of customer success that's absolutely essential is automation. And so this goes back to the first question that I asked, which is customer success a revenue center or is it a cost center? And so the challenge is customer success, frankly, is a bit of both. Best case scenario, yes, it is a revenue center, but oftentimes there's a lot of what customer success does that isn't necessarily directly tied to revenue. And so when you're making resource allocations and budgeting and stuff like that, customer success oftentimes gets the short end of the stick from a budgeting standpoint. And so the amount of people that you could hire would be 2-3x what you actually have funding for. And so the way to actually get customer success to really deliver the true value is you've got to rely on automation. And you've got to be able to rely on systems that allow you to do a one-to-many approach for as many customers as possible, and to really free up as many resources as possible to focus on where it's going to make the most difference for your customers. So the first type of system that you need is a sales account management CRM. So the two players that you typically hear the most about are going to be Salesforce and HubSpot. These are fantastic sales tools. They're not designed for actual account day-to-day management. They're great for tracking sales activities, doing mass blast emails out to people, stuff like that. Not so much for managing the day-to-day activities of, I have a portfolio of 200 companies. Who do I need to talk to? Who's up for renewal? Which ones are not tracking properly? And so that's where more of the customer success CRM comes into play. Speaking from personal experience, I haven't had to buy one of these for any of my companies recently. So there are a number of players out there. Gainsign and Tatango are two of the ones that come up quite a lot in conversation. But this is more for your actual customer success managers that have a dedicated portfolio. Now it enables them to really structure their workflow and to really ensure that they're allocating their time and their meetings accordingly. And then the final aspect of this is customer support CRMs. So one of the big aspects with large tech companies is just the sheer amount of volume of support requests that come in. It could be something as simple as I can't log into the system, or it could be something like a junior person on my team pushed something into dev that they shouldn't have, and they've locked everyone in the company out of the system, and none of us can do any work. And so there are a couple of, well, there are quite a lot of customer support CRMs on the system. So there's Zendesk, there's Salesforce Service Cloud, there's Freshdesk, there's Service Desk, a bunch of other ones. But effectively, you want your customer support CRM to do a couple of things. First will be ticket deflection. And a lot of it is you need to get as much noise out of the system as possible. Because if you train your customers to be incredibly lazy and just ping you every time they have a problem, that's what you're going to do. And what you're going to find is that a lot of the problems that people are reaching out to you with are not, in fact, actual problems. It's just people being lazy and not looking for the information themselves. But the other thing too is you really want to understand, like, what are the trends that you're seeing in the data? Or, you know, do I have enough support resources, or am I taking too long to respond to requests, et cetera? And a well thought out implementation of one of these customer support CRMs really does make a huge difference in setting the customers as well as the company up for success. So, you know, quick anecdote in that respect. I was with an Australian startup for a year. And when I joined, we actually didn't have anyone that owned the customer support. So I had about 15, 20 people on my team, but we had no SLAs. People picked up support tickets in their free time, but because everyone was stretched so thin, nobody had any free time. And so I ended up hiring a Zendesk implementation person to come in and actually clean up our Zendesk implementation. And in the process, we realized that we needed to actually have dedicated Zendesk support people. Went and hired a couple of people in the Philippines. Went from a sub 50 net promoter score to over 90% in less than a month, just by fixing our article tags, making it a lot easier for companies to be able to find articles and to resolve problems, but also holding people accountable for SLAs for, like, did you pick a ticket up in time? All right. So moving to more thinking about, like, how you actually run a customer success business. One of the things I wanted to do is, like, highlight some of the key metrics that I've used over the years for just running and really thinking about a customer success business. And the nice thing is a lot of these metrics are actually automated. So if you have a sales CRM or a customer success CRM, if you architect the systems properly and you're really standardizing the data and ensuring that your client data is actually correct, it saves you so much time and money and effort in the long run. So some of the key metrics: gross revenue. Yeah, how much volume are you doing in sales? Net revenue retention, that basically splits your customers into cohorts and tells you, like, of the cohorts that are up for renewal, like, how much revenue are you getting in a certain period of time? Renewals and churn. There's slightly different metrics, but they're both really, really important. Renewals tells you kind of it's a percentage metric. So, you know, how many customers out of all the customers possible that renewed, or the total dollars. Like, if you had 100 customers up for renewal and only 80 renewed, you have an 80% renewal rate, which is fantastic for most SaaS companies. However, you know, if during that period you have a lot of customers that weren't even up for renewal, that dropped out of your product, that's what churn captures, is what's really actually happening from a total customer standpoint. Annual contract value. This is a super important metric because typically with SaaS contracts, you're looking at multi-year contracts. And so this is kind of a normalization of, say it's a $100,000 contract over 3 years, you're really only looking at $33,000 a year per customer. Or, you may have a customer that signed a 1-year contract for worth $100,000. When you start doing the comparison of your different customers, it enables you to really think about who do you really need to focus on versus other customers. Average contract length is a super interesting metric because this basically tells you how much time do you have to ensure that your customers are happy across that entire customer life cycle. With SaaS contracts, you want as long as possible. And part of this is it takes a really long time for a lot of SaaS companies to really be able to demonstrate the value of the product. I remember, we had Salesforce customers where it would take 18 months to do an implementation, depending on the complexity of the product that we're needing to put into place. And so we had companies where they had signed a 2-year contract. And so by the time we had started the implementation and finished the implementation, we only had 1 or 2 months worth of time to actually demonstrate value to get them to re-sign a contract for all these licenses that they hadn't been using for that entire 2-year period of time. And it put a lot of pressure on the team the shorter these contract periods were. And so we did a lot of incentivizing and structuring compensation plans to really try and drive longer average contract length, because it made it a lot easier for us to create a very predictable revenue stream, but also be able to have enough time to demonstrate the value that we were creating for the customers. 2 metrics that I have a love-hate relationship with are CSAT and Net Promoter Score. CSAT is the survey that you get oftentimes when you go to a retail store, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with the service that you received today? It's not a great metric, but it's a really good directional metric, which is why you see a lot of companies use it, because it does capture that sentiment. And for customers that are giving you really low CSAT scores, those are the ones where you really want to go in and focus a lot of your attention on to try and turn those situations around, understand why are they ambivalent or angry with you, and ensure that you're doing everything possible so that you can save them for no. The other metric, which is Net Promoter Score, works very similarly. The question is slightly different. It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to tell your friends, coworkers, colleagues about us? And that kind of captures more, are they a net promoter or are they a net detractor on you in your business? And part of it is for a lot of companies, it's really important, that word of mouth. In tech, people move between companies all the time. And so, average tenure in the Valley was about 1 to 2 years for most of us. And so when you have people that are constantly moving to new companies, et cetera, you don't want people that are ambivalent or hating your product going to, competitors or, companies that you haven't necessarily worked with yet. Because if your salespeople are going in trying to sell your product, if there are people in there that have very embedded, very passionate views about your business, good, bad, or ugly, it makes it really, really difficult for you to turn those situations around. And so what you want to do is to really convince your customers to become, your advocates, your strongest allies for you and your business, because that really helps ensure that you are set up for success. So support metrics. This is one that is super important because it helps you understand, like, what are the types of problems that your customers are having and where possible issues are with the product, either from like a functionality, a feature, or maybe something's just plain broken in the product. So the support key metrics I typically look at are ticket volume, ticket backlog, which is basically how many things are just kind of hanging there and just not getting resolved, whether it be waiting on the tech team, whether it be waiting on the customer for more additional information, whether it be just not having enough bodies to actually pick up the tickets in a given period of time. Average first response time. How long does it take for somebody to get back to you? Average resolution time. So, if I put in a critical ticket, does it take you 4 hours to resolve it, or does it take you 6 weeks to resolve it? Those really impact the customer experience, that customer evaluation of you. Average reply time is the median amount of time required to respond to a ticket. So sometimes what happens is if you have shift-based people that only work, say, 9 to 5 New Zealand time, but your customers are predominantly in Europe, you're going to have massive delays in the response time if you're not having anyone working European hours. And so it creates, an entire working day that's lost. And that really does have an impact on business. Replies per resolution. This one is a really interesting metric because it kind of gives you an indication as to whether or not these are new problems that are needing to be developed, or if it's something where you're literally sending them a link to a Zendesk article and then closing out the ticket. If it's a discoverability issue, there are ways that you can do to really engage in that ticket deflection. But if it really is that you've sifted out all of those easy problems and that the tickets are requiring a lot more work, then that's indicative of that there may be some key problems on the challenges on the product side that need to be addressed and resolved. And then Net Promoter Score, goes back to like, what is the customer sentiment after they've interacted with you? Another thing that's really important to do, and I've seen this at a lot of relatively early stage tech companies, is when you're building your product, you need to really think through like, how do you think your customers are going to use the product versus how do customers actually use the product? Because there's typically this giant disconnect between expected behavior and actual behavior. And so building a company or product specific scorecard of what your expected behavior or what you think your customers should be doing in the product is super, super valuable, because you need to be able to have that insight into, are people using the product? Are they getting the value? If I go to them tomorrow with renewal paperwork, are they going to sign it? So, some of these indicators can be everything from, license deployment. So if they bought 100 licenses, did they actually deploy 100 licenses, or did they deploy 1 license? What is the utilization? Like, are people actually using the product? Are they going in once a week? Are they going in once a month? Are they spending 8 hours a day on your product? You want to really understand, like, what does that product usage actually look like? Last same period, how long ago was it that they logged in? Have they not logged in for 6 months, or are they, the last login was yesterday? Support tickets. Are they using the functionalities that you thought they were going to use, or are they coming up with new corner cases of how they're using the product or how they're thinking about the product? And then also utilization of new product features. This is something that I've personally dealt with, where the engineering team and the product team spends so much time coming up with these amazing new features, and then we deploy it, and then it's crickets. Nobody uses those features, and part of it may be they don't know about the features, or maybe it's features and functionalities that people didn't actually want. One of the most powerful things from personal experience was actually at Salesforce. So every year they have Dreamforce, which is this completely crazy customer events. You have about 70, 80,000 customers coming from all over the world to San Francisco. And during Mark Benioff's keynote speech, one of the things he does every time is actually pulls up a list of all of the bugs and features that were upvoted by customers that the product team actually implemented into the product. And it's the only time I've ever seen customers like clapping and cheering and standing up for like feature requests being deployed into a product. But it's really powerful for people to have that ability to say, look, I asked you for this feature, we all upvoted for this feature, we finally got it, and it's actually making our life and our instances better. So one of the one of the things that I do want to be cognizant of is like, I know what I've painted is kind of like the ideal utopia state of what customer success can and should look like. I do want to give you a bit of a reality check of, how hard and how difficult it is. When I was at Salesforce, I was actually the director of strategy and operations for the customer support team. So I worked directly for the CEO of Salesforce, as well as the head of customer success. We had about 4,000 people in our customer success organization. And you'd think being at Salesforce, we would have the world's best implementation of Salesforce ever. The reality is we had the jankiest implementation of Salesforce. We were running about 4 or 5 generations behind what our customers were running. Because in the early days of Salesforce, there had been no controls on our Salesforce instance. And so every single field had been customized long ago by employees that were no longer with the business. So we actually couldn't calculate many of these metrics or actually run a lot of our business off of Salesforce. So like I had an analyst on my team, we were paying him 6 figures and his entire job was to calculate our churn rate every single month, because we had over 170,000 customers, but our customer records weren't correct within Salesforce, and it would have taken 2 to 3 years just to go in and fix it and redo all the work in it. So we'd have to export everything into Excel. We'd have to network multiple computers together to actually run these models and actually figure out what our churn number was. We had all these cool features and functionalities that we were selling to our customers, and all these like great visualization of, churn rate, ACV, customer cohorts, and all that other stuff. And oftentimes we were just having to pull everything out and, throw it together in Tableau or something and plaster it into presentations, because we hadn't internally actually done a lot of the stuff that I'm actually advocating that you do. And so it's just really important, as you're starting this customer journey, to really think about, how do I ensure that I'm setting myself and my the teams up for as much success as possible, and really being mindful of how powerful customer success can be when done correctly, but also some of the challenges, because it's the small little things that, once you hit that inflection point and your customer base starts growing exponentially, that's when problems really start compounding and creating real challenges for being able to create a really fantastic end-to-end customer experience for your customer base. So with that, at the end of the day, when customer success is done well, customer success will increase your company revenue and your company valuation. It does this in a couple of ways. So first and foremost, if you have defined customer journeys for your customers, you're going to reduce your customer attrition and churn. You're going to make it extremely predictable for what your revenue is going to be month over month, because you're going to know exactly which customers are on track, which customers are, heading somewhat in the wrong direction, and have enough time to really turn those situations around and get them to actually renew the product. You're going to be able to increase your year-over-year customer spend, because you're going to be able to upsell and cross-sell. Because if you understand how your customers are using the product, you're going to be able to come up with additional use cases or things that they didn't necessarily know that they needed. One of the things we did at Salesforce was we actually created a product called Mission Critical Success, because we found that we had a lot of companies that were running their entire business off of Salesforce. And so 1 hour down basically wiped out the entire productivity of the company. And so we would actually charge a 40% license premium, which was really, really fantastic money for us, that less than an hour's worth of lost revenue for the business for not having access to our systems. You can also, good customer success also improves your product stickiness and that customer loyalty, because you're going to have a point person that's responsible for ensuring that the companies are using the product and are getting as much value as possible out of the product, and to really be that internal champion for the business. And then, ultimately, you're going to create predictable revenue. Predictable revenue is absolutely key, because it enables you to really understand how much money do you have to play with, and where can you invest more money into product, for instance, or maybe in marketing or sales or customer success. It really makes it a lot easier to have that safety net and that predictability for what your business will look like. So with that, I'd love to open the floor up for any questions that people may have. Go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so fascinating. There's a lot of metrics. If you're currently running a SaaS product, but you are a bit light on metrics, which ones do you think are the ones you should sort of start with?
In terms of starting your metrics, I think part of it is pull a customer list. Like the number of companies I've talked to where like they can't even give me a customer list of like, who are my biggest customers, like historically or now. That is actually a really fantastic starting place, because you can just start building those cohorts off of geography, off of spend, etc. The other thing too is if you can just start pulling metrics on utilization from the product, because that's the one where I found there to be a big disconnect, where the tech teams and the product teams may have access to that information. The sales and customer success team typically don't have access to that information. And so starting to be able to communicate that for like, hey, you know, this person just spent $100,000 with us, but nobody's actually logged into the product in 6 months. That's a huge red flag. So being able to just start getting something is better than nothing.
There's some obviously people are engaged because they're asking, how do I get in touch with you, Ngaio? So you can see your contact details there. You might have a few people wanting to tap you up for some personalized advice there. And we've just put it in the chat there too. It's bncadvisory.com. So Ngaio at bncadvisory.com. You can get there. What are your thoughts on jumping in on Reddit threads if your company gets mentioned?
Absolutely. Reddit is disproportionately tech focused. I'm an avid user of Reddit, for better or for worse. But a lot of it is, you know, that customer success, it's all about managing, you know, that information and that perception of your customers. And so, you know, some of the most powerful Reddit threads I've seen are like, where people have a problem and somebody from the company reaches out to the person with like, hey, I've DM'd you, like, here's my email, like, reach out to me, let's have a conversation, let's get that fixed. Because you really want that powerful amplification of like, we're listening, we're responsive, you know, we're going to own our mistakes, but we're also here to make your life as easy as possible. Because I think, you want to be where your customers are, frankly. And it does make your life easier the faster you can get ahead of these situations, because it's when you don't respond, a lot of these comments or, you know, Twitter mentions or whatever end up taking a life of their own and growing into a massive PR issue, as opposed to, oh, this is something easy that we could have fixed in 30 minutes or less. Just
so telling your story rather than letting someone else tell your story for you. Okay, so yep, jump on those Reddit threads, it sounds like. Next question is, how persistent should you be when engaging customers who aren't using your product anymore? Should you be chasing them down?
You definitely should be. And the thing is, what you want to do is you want to provide different tactics of escalation. So one of the things that I found super, super useful is to actually leverage executive sponsors. And so this is something I've done at a lot of companies, where basically you'll have somebody with a C title be like, hey, so-and-so is really interested in talking to you. Could we set up some time for them to talk with you to just understand like more about, you know, how we can better engage with you, et cetera. If it's not working for somebody, you know, the customer success manager, et cetera, to really get a hold of them, you want to leverage all the resources you can. One of the things we did at Salesforce that was super helpful was we did something called our Red Accounts. And so every week we had a meeting with Keith Block, Maria, and the senior leadership of customer success. And what we'd do is we would pull up all of the accounts that were trending towards not renewing. And, you know, some weeks there may be 5, other weeks there may be 50. We would have to have specific action items on every single one of them. And one of the C-suite execs was tasked with making sure that that happened. And if it didn't happen, they were the ones that were reamed over the coals during that weekly meeting. And that was not a meeting that you wanted to get yelled at. But it was really powerful because, you know, we were able to turn around a lot of these accounts just by having executive eyeballs on it. Because a lot of times it was like, oh, I know so-and-so who works at this company, like, let me give them a call and find out what's going on. Or like, if so-and-so is not responsive, let's find somebody else to work with. You have to end up being really creative with a lot of these red accounts, because the worst thing you can do is to just leave them alone, because there's no way you're going to save them. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be, you know, thoughts and prayers. And like, there's nothing else that you could do. When the reality is, if a tactic isn't working, then change tactics. You've got to find somebody else in the company to talk to. You've got to find a way to make them engage with you. And sometimes it's going to be like, look, we're just really busy, like not top of mind, nothing's wrong. Or it may be like, hey, this person went on maternity leave, or this person quit the company, or took on a new role, and this isn't part of their remit anymore. Like, let's figure out like who the right people are, et cetera. And that's part of the reason why with customer success, you want to ensure that you have a breadth of relationship across the company, because too often you'll have a gatekeeper for the relationship on the client side. And if something happens to that person, and then you're put in scramble mode. And so the more people that you have access to really act as those internal advocates, you know, and this is where CRM really comes in handy, because if you have a CRM of a customer relationship, you should have everyone who has a license under it, everyone that you've ever talked to as part of that database. So if the main person is responding, then you start working through the other contacts, and you know, you work until you find somebody to actually give you the time of day so that you can start rebuilding that relationship.
I like that it's not just about one size fits all for those disengaged customers. It's about identifying them and then finding the right treatment or approach specifically for each one based on your relationships that you have with that. Yeah. It's definitely something like having relationships at those lots of different tiers as well as worked before with other roles. That's really interesting. Any more questions, anybody? Some great questions there. No? Time for one more if anyone's got one. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Thank you so much. You've got Ngaio's phone number there online, and please definitely follow her on LinkedIn if you're interested to find out more about customer success content coming forward. So great to have you, Ngaio, someone of working at your caliber in our community, and I'm sure we will be in touch to have your expertise at many other events going forward. So thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you. And it's been a pleasure talking with all of you today. So.
Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.